Good morning, good evening, or happy days. Welcome to another Founder and Friends with me, John Daniel Trask. And today I'm joined by my good friend, James Montemagno. Welcome, James. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing, JD?
I'm very good, very good. We've managed to sort out most of our mic issues, so hopefully we'll be good today. Um, Firstly, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about .NET. And when I say a little bit, I mean a lot of it. James and I have been around for a really long time. We've seen .NET, in the early days. We've seen the current stuff. And obviously James works at Microsoft. He's got some secrets about the future that I'm sure he can't quite share, but he knows where we're going as an industry. And so we thought it would be a great time to sit down, have a bit of a chat about what is going on in .NET, all of the different options that are out there. I'll be the first to sort of acknowledge a wee bit that even as an old timer .NET guy, sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming just how many things are going on in the .NET ecosystem. So hopefully today's session will mean that we all get a bit of a breakdown, have a bit more clarity off the back of that. But before we dig into it, I always like to start with hearing a little bit about how people have got into the tech industry and all of that. And James, I'd love to hear a bit of your story. How did you get started?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I was really lucky. I grew up in Ohio, and in my high school, I was really fortunate enough that one of the math instructors was doing programming classes. So we actually had a computer lab, and a bunch of my friends actually took the basic class early on, and I got really jealous because they were building all these cool basic apps that were running on their TI-84 or 83 at the time, and I was blown away. And I was a very big video game kid. There's a big
Yep.
Nintendo kid, still am to this day. Now it's Xbox and Nintendo, so on the both big Game Pass subscriber here. But I was blown away. I was like, well, you can make this stuff. Like, the things I'm playing, I could build. And I immediately signed up for the next programming class in high school, and it was C, C++. We're using Visual Studio at the time. It was like the Visual C, whatever it was.
Yep.
And I started building command line adventures early on. This is in the early 2000s. And I was like, this is what I want to do for a living. I want to be a video game programmer. And I went off and I went to school in Arizona where I thought I was going to be a video game programmer. I did it as much as I could. And I worked at a game studio as an intern, and then a little bit after, where we worked on Xbox 360 games. And that's where I was doing a lot of C++. But I was in college and I had an instructor there, Phil Miller, that taught C# and interface-based programming and things like that. And it was the first time I was back in Visual Studio. I was in this object-oriented programming language, and my mind was blown away. And I was like, this is it. I was like, yes. So I went back to the game studio and I said, I no longer want to work on the engine. I want to work on tools for the designers and for the balancers. I wrote all these WinForms apps with DirectX and all this amazing stuff. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I left the game industry and I got a job at Canon writing printer software, enterprise printer software that does huge blueprint printers. Like, they print these blueprints for like buildings in Vegas, for example, that are mission critical. And I worked there for a long time and wrote a lot of WinForms apps, a lot of WPF, a lot of Silverlight. I kind of rode the train of whatever we needed, and it was really exciting. And then I went to the final PDC in Redmond, Washington. This is before build started back up again. And that's when I got a Windows Phone device. Azure was coming out, and I went back to my hotel room. I started writing Windows Phone apps because I knew XAML, I knew C#, and I had this super computer in my pocket, right? This was 15 years ago, 13 years ago, 12, something a while ago. And I was like, now this is the thing I want to do. It's not games. It is this supercomputer on my pocket. And I ended up moving to Seattle area to become a full-time mobile developer. And that's when I found Xamarin. So I could write all my mobile apps in C# for all the different programming languages. And then I ended up working at Xamarin as a developer advocate. And now I'm at Microsoft in the .NET ecosystem. So it really, I went back to my school and I gave a talk on something similar to this. I said, sometimes it's a single person. It's a single moment. It's that special thing. And that could be a parent. That could be a friend, that could be a celebrity, that could be a sports athlete, someone that inspires you, right?
Hmm.
And it really was Phil Miller. I credit a lot to Phil Miller. He teaches at ASU now, which is not where I went, but I went to a small tech school. But Phil Miller, just this class, his passion around C sharp, put me on this journey. And of course, the Visual Studio and the C sharp teams making awesome products. I call it the dot do it language, right? You just
Yep.
dot and then all the things you can do. And because I was using, Eclipse and
Yep.
NetBeans and all these other things at the time for doing Java work, and Turbo Pascal and stuff like that as well. And I was like, wow, this is the thing I want to do. And that's where I'm here now. And it's a long journey, but it was a fun journey. And it's really cool because for all of those years, the 15, whatever, 20, almost 20 years since I graduated high school, it's like I was able to find C sharp and then build mobile
Yep.
apps, web apps, games, desktop apps, services, functions, like all these things. And it's just a blast. So I've, yeah, enjoyed every moment of it. And I love being at Microsoft now, really close to the .NET team.
I absolutely love the passion that just comes through in your voice around that, and I share that same vibe. You know, I use the analogy with folks that when I first discovered programming, it was like discovering a box of Lego that just had an infinite number of pieces. It really came down to my ability to think about how to put stuff together. I didn't have to beg my parents for an extra if statement. You just could kind of build and create, and it was like this wonderland inside this machine,
Yeah.
which was really cool. And I know I can be a little bit. This is not language bashing as such, but like similar to you, I'd sort of played a bit with Pascal and things. And I quite liked the terseness of the language. And then at university, we were learning Java, and this is not to pan Java too much, but it was horribly verbose. It's just like,
Mm.
my goodness, how many factories do I have to make in here? And then so I sort of took the view of, hey, why don't we start looking at C sharp at university, because all the universities were teaching Java, and I just thought, well, Microsoft's a pretty big company. There's got to be some demand for their stuff out
Yeah.
there. So I learned a bit of C sharp, and that's when I felt like, I was like, this does feel like Java, but with a much nicer syntax. I can take this everywhere. And then it just became like the core language. I love C sharp.
Yeah, that development environment too, I think has a lot to do with at least early days for me and even to today of being productive, right? Whether I'm in
Hmm.
Visual Studio or VS Code and using the integrations. I think that was the thing that won me over. I encourage everyone. A lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, should I use this? Should I build with that framework or this language? This. I was like, I think it's fun to try them all, to be honest with you.
Yep.
I do a little Kotlin, I do a little Swift, I do a lot of C sharp,
Hmm.
I dabble in what's new, and try to at least understand it, like at least try to understand the hello world of it. What do
Hmm.
I like? What do I don't like? And that's not just the languages, but also the frameworks that are out there too. Because that's what I did my first, week on the job. Like when I started at this small company up in Kirkland, Washington, we were doing TV hardware and software for hotels and DVRs and also Windows Media Center as well.
Oh, yeah.
We built TV tuners. So my first app that I needed to build was so this is in 2011, 2010. It was a remote DVR management tool for Windows Media Center and also for these hotel chains. And the grid guide and all this stuff and browsing everything remotely. So we had like something that ran locally and expose that to the app. And I sat there and the first thing I did was I was like, okay, well, I've never built an iOS app. I've never built an Android app. I don't know much about Objective-C at all. I know Java a little bit. So I installed everything. I tried native. I tried the web stuff that was out there. I tried them all. And I said, what is the thing that's going to enable me to be happy,
Hmm.
be productive, and also deliver the product that I'm getting paid to deliver, and that will make my customers happy. And that's when I found Xamarin and continued my C sharp lineage up until now. But so that's what I tell people: is like, find the thing that makes you happy. Hopefully it's .NET, hopefully it's C sharp, but it may not be, but that's okay too. At least give it a try and give feedback, and then that's super important.
Absolutely. I've always been impressed, for example, on sites like Hacker News, that a lot of developers across all domains seem to be willing to acknowledge that C# is something that Microsoft really captured some magic in a bottle with, and it's funny, I know it's not where they made all their money, but I love people sometimes talking about the challenges of building a dev tools company. And then you kind of remind people the largest company in the world started as a dev tools company. It's kind of in their DNA to think about the developer. And I think you can still see that coming through in the tech stack. So one of the things, again, we've been around a wee while. I remember starting out with things like web forms and, view state and getting rid of view state and the joy of MVC. And then, as you say, we had all the mobile stuff. And I'm sure you're not the only one listening to, or, involved today that's not thinking about, the sad death of Windows Phone and hoping for the mighty return. But so you kind of went to Xamarin. You started looking there. How did had Windows Phone been discontinued at that point? Was it still a player? Where was that sitting in the life cycle of you sort of transitioning into .NET on all the mobile platforms?
Yeah, when I started, this was like when Windows 8 was launching and Windows Phone were really well paired together. So it was in the infancy stages, I would say. So the first app that we shipped was iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and Windows 8 all at the same time simultaneously. And I designed, engineered, tested, and deployed all of those, which was fun at a tiny little startup that I was at. And yeah, for me, what's great about it, is I picked a tech stack. When we think of C#, it's a programming language. There's a stack underneath it. Java has a Java stack underneath it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the mission and the goal of like the common language runtime, the CLR, is that you can make your programming code run everywhere, right? And you think of .NET, it actually kind of does run everywhere, right? And it's in the cloud. It runs on a little Raspberry Pi. It runs on a Meadow board with the full .NET. It runs my phone. It runs on my computer. It runs on my Mac. It runs on my Linux machine. It runs everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was, what is something that I'm going to use today and then use into the future on where I may go in my career, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got lucky. I think that I feel like I came of age of programming at the perfect time because I fell in love with desktop development and I was able to leverage my passion for like WinForms and WPF and Silverlight at the time, and then bring it to the phone and then leverage that on iOS and Android at the perfect time when it was in its real infancy. We were only a year or two into the App Store at that time, maybe 3 years or 4 years, something like that. So it was really early days and it was really exciting, right? It was the days where you designed for a screen size. Like there was one iPhone. And then I was working at the company where it was the year where the bigger iPhone came out. We'd update our splash screens and redesign stuff. So it was this beautiful time where it was like you're finding a sport for the first time, or you're finding live streaming, or you're finding a new programming language or some new hobby for the first time. You start to evolve and it starts to evolve with you, right? Like you just didn't become a pickleball expert overnight, right? Like pickleball existed, you joined in, pickleball's advancing, you know what I mean? And we got outdoor, we got indoor. What are we doing here? So you're evolving, you're upping your game. And then of course the devices expand over time. So it was fun in that regard, platforms, devices, things come and go, right? In the short time that I've been here, right? There's been, there's foldable devices now, there's larger tablets, there's smaller tablets, there's things that are on your face, there's things that are on your wrist. Those things evolve, right? The Watch OS is drastically different than what it was when it first launched, right? And I'm sure with Vision OS, it's going to be the same. And iPad OS, it really was just iOS, and now it's its own operating system, right? At this point, so devices, OSs, things come and they go. The question for me was, as the industry evolves over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, is there going to be something stable there that I want to latch onto? And that was C# and .NET. And I've been super happy with it. And it's been a real renaissance, I think with .NET Core and then .NET, itself now, .NET 5 to 8 now, and Xamarin turning into .NET MAUI and being really integrated. It just really is a great constant iteration that the engineering team and the PM team and the amazing team are just crushing, and the community just so more active than ever. And it's so cool that my job is so close to the community and the vibes together between these three things, right? Community, product, engineering, and then ecosystem, right? So, amazing component vendors, Raygun, like all these companies that are building on top of the ecosystem. It's so cool, right? When I started, um, I had one option to build mobile apps with .NET, which was Xamarin, right? Now
Mhm.
you have a lot of choices. You not only have what's from shipping from Microsoft, but you have great companies like Avalonia and you have companies like Uno that are out there,
Mhm.
right? That are building on top of those building blocks that enable unique scenarios for developers that are out there. And you could do it. Like, so if I for some reason I need to go build a Linux app, I can go do that. Right?
Mhm.
I'll pick Uno or Avalonia, whatever fits my needs. I get to reuse all my knowledge, all my skill set, all my stuff. And that's the beauty, especially in the last, decade, I would say, of .NET and C# has just been like, to me, a rocket ship. And it's been awesome. I'm sure, been around it for so long, but some people that are new coming in,
Mhm.
maybe to learning for the first time, it's also more accessible than ever. Like Free Code Camp has a full C# certification. Katie on my team and our learning team partnered with Free Code Camp to launch that, which is so cool. Like free certification, like what?
Mhm.
That's so cool. And then Microsoft Learn, like all this, hundreds of courses that you can take for free, plus
Yep.
just YouTube, Twitch. It is crazy, the amount of like my first C# was like C# in a nutshell, right? And it was like this big. A C#, I don't know, 6 at the time or something like that,
Yep.
5 or 4, something like that. That was my introduction, right? So it's cool to see it evolve, and it's been fun. So yeah,
Yeah, I totally support everything you've just said there. And we chatted about this a little bit in one of the pre chats for this, and I can see Umar there has asked a question of what's Uno. So we'll do a little bit of a talk through this, but an example for me. So Uno and Avalonia allow you to build cross platform applications, effectively reusing your skills with XAML to say build a Linux app, which at the moment WPF doesn't natively support a Linux as a target. It's one of the few things it doesn't target. Does target a lot of stuff, and so like in the COVID lockdowns, I gave myself the challenge of using Linux as a daily driver at home. I was kind of like, okay, you're going to be stuck inside, can't go
yeah.
anywhere. I might as well suffer through the pain of Linux and fixing everything constantly.
It's fun to
But
learn. It's a fun learning journey you went on.
absolutely. And that was the thing. I was like, well, I have these C# skills, and I'm really stoked that we have it on. We can at least run the runtime on Linux. Raygun
Yeah.
runs all the C# on the back end, and over time, more and more of that runs on Linux too. But I kind of like you. I grew up. I like desktop apps a little bit. I like the speed of just being able to cycle through, not having to worry about the server component. But I needed to be able to build on Linux. And so I jumped in on Avalonia, and that's no discredit to the Uno folks either. I think both stacks are amazing. I just happened to be aware of Avalonia at the time, and just reusing those skills. And this was, to be fair, was also before sort of the GPTs all burst on the scene. And one of the things I will encourage folks is if you're a developer and you might be kind of like, hey, a lot of us say, hey, we're not designers, we can't make nice UIs. I tell you what, those things can generate amazing XAML. So if you want to build a quick
Yeah.
and dirty desktop application and you just want it to look cool, ask them for putting to make it for you, and that was a huge help. So absolutely share that and being able to reuse those skills over time in
Yeah.
there. Absolutely. Yep.
And I get people all the time that ask me, because I obviously present on Maui and Blazor Hybrid and the stack there. Like, oh, well, what should I pick this or I need to do this? And I'm like, well, that's the great part. It's like there is this ecosystem, right? You think of .NET, the runtime runs everywhere, right?
Yep.
And then there's basically a layer of platforms, right? So you
Yep.
need to be able to go to iOS or to Windows or to Android, and there's for all intents and purposes an SDK available, right? Like
Yes.
inside of Windows, you have like WinUI and the Windows App SDK, and then for Mac, for iOS, for Android, there's in part of .NET MAUI is iOS, Android, and Mac for .NET. And that's kind of the base layer. And then .NET MAUI provides abstractions for UI and for platform integrations. So you can do everything in C# and .NET. Now the .NET MAUI XAML and or C# UI markup is a MAUI flavor, right? It's its
Hmm.
own unique thing where you're right. Like actually like Avalonia and Uno, which are also cross-platform .NET frameworks, they build on top of iOS and Android for .NET, and sometimes Mac as well, based on the targets that you have. but they do it a little bit different. Like with .NET MAUI, it's native controls and there's custom drawing you can do. But for Uno and Avalonia, they do custom drawing. They go to a lot of different platforms based on like what they offer. So they can do like WebAssembly, they can do Linux, and but they use different markups. So you're right, Avalonia uses WPF-esque, I would say very close, and then Uno uses WinUI. So based on the type of paradigms you might be used to or the type of app you need, they're out there. And the great thing is it is one ecosystem, right? And you see control vendors out there like, your Telerik, Syncfusion, things like that, building for the vastness of these different platforms. Because under the hood for iOS and Android, it's still running on those core. So that's cool. Is like when iOS and Android for .NET upgrade to .NET 8 and .NET 9, the platforms like Maui or Uno or Avalonia that are built on top of it get all that goodness because it's all built on top of .NET as well. So when there's native AOT stuff, boom, you get native AOT stuff too. So that's what's cool, is those options are out there, which when I started, we didn't have those options, but the option that was there was perfect for me at the time. So, which is great.
Whenever I've set up some of that cross-platform stuff, to be honest, I find it's a bit complicated, but I'm always reminding myself, I'm like, the little bit of complexity here is saving me the immense complexity of trying to do this myself.
Yeah.
In there. Hey, I just want to loop back on one thing, because we do have a question there from Umar as well, asking about that free certification. And I'll just say, before we jump back to that, we've had a couple of folks at Raygun sit down and do that as well, because even though we do a lot of C#, we do hire folks straight out of university, and sometimes we have standards around what are our development standards, and that means that there might not be an opportunity to sort of to learn what you don't know. And so it was a good sort of well-rounded thing. But could you just talk a little bit more about that for a second, just for the folks that wanted to catch where they could go and get that?
Yeah, totally. So, when you go to learn.microsoft.com, that's sort of the hub for documentation, samples, videos, and training. And Microsoft Learn training are these like self-guided free training courses. You can learn basically, there's like thousands of them. So you want to learn anything about AI, about Azure, about Visual Studio, VS Code, Python development, C# development, stuff with .NET development, Teams development, M365, everything in the Microsoft ethos, right? In the product dropdown, you find .NET. So you'll find learning courses on learning like the basics of .NET and like using libraries, like System.io, for example, to doing RESTful service calls. But you'll also find learning paths, which are a bunch of modules, the training modules that you just do on your machine or sometimes in a code space. And you'll find stuff on .NET MAUI, you'll find stuff on .NET Aspire, on cloud native development, on web development, on desktop development, all that stuff. And you'll also find, I gotta say, it's about like maybe 40 plus hours of C# content. It's 6 different learning paths, and it's all on Microsoft Learn. So you can just go take it. But we partnered with Free Code Camp, and on freecodecamp.org. So you just if you just type in C# certification, you'll find it. You'll see the blog post from Katie or from Free Code Camp. But basically, you take all of the module learning on Microsoft Learn, and you link your Free Code Camp account with Microsoft Learn. And as you unlock these trophies on Microsoft Learn training, you unlock the progression on Free Code Camp. And at the end, you take an exam. So it's like, I don't know, it's a lot of it's like 100 questions. I don't know. It's a lot. You take the certification exam, and then you get a certification from Free Code Camp and Microsoft. So it has Quincy from Free Code Camp and Julia Lewison, who is our CVP of DevDiv, our developer division, signed little certificate that you can print off, slap it on your wall, certified C# developer. And that one's going to get you, from the introduction to up to like intermediate-esque, you know what I mean? We're not quite in the advanced stuff, but it's called foundational C#. So it is that foundational certification. We have a lot more planned, that is for sure, on the C# front, because that core is hopefully showing that C# is approachable, that it's easy to learn and to use. Yep. And you can do everything right in VS Code. So the whole thing is, some of it's in the browser, and then you evolve into VS Code. So you can do it on Windows, Mac, Linux, and boom, you're good to go. And one of them is even showing you how to set up VS Code for C# development and everything. So it's quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even for folks that are probably a little bit more experienced, but if they've not used C sharp at all, for a good just here's a good clean primer on how to think
Yeah.
about this. It's a great way to start out.
And Scott Hanselman got certified. So, if Scott Hanselman can do it, who's been around the world of .NET much longer than me, and he shared out on LinkedIn and Twitter, certification document or whatever, and he could do it. And I did mine as well. It's fun to do. It's sometimes you forget you do it for a while,
Hmm.
programming. And the cool part is like now the IDEs are like so good. They're just like kind of like, we'll just do it for you. Like, oh, that's the old namespace. Let's like, we'll just rewrite it for you. Right click, fix up, make it all awesome.
Yep.
But it's sometimes really fun to go back and then revisit some of those core concepts. Oh, you know what? I have been using that, or like, oh, I didn't know with null coalescing that I could do this other thing. So it's
Hmm.
nice to kind of go back and refresh yourself on that stuff.
It's certainly, I agree with that because one thing, and I'm going to be honest, I personally am a bit of a like, I wish they'd slow down on this, but the language evolution of C sharp, I sometimes feel like the annual cycle is a little bit on the aggressive side and I say that as you might imagine, my CEO role usually means that I'm looking wantingly at programming, not actually spending all day doing it. But the point is if I was say doing .NET on way back in the day, like full framework and whatnot, there's probably a lot of new things that are just the new way of doing stuff and to
Hmm.
refresh yourself. So I find it useful from that point of view as well in there. Moving on a little bit from the training and back to the stack, I guess. So we've talked, and I have a real problem with these founder and friends that I end up just loving the nostalgia trip of like all the old tech. But let's talk a little bit more about the future tech. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of the Xamarin to Maui part, I think is fairly understood. I can see questions popping up from folks talking about Maui a bunch, but and we support this, but like to be blunt, I was a bit confused myself about like the Blazor, which can include Maui if it's hybrid, but where does Blazor fit versus sort of WinUI 3 versus web versus where's the current state of play? Help us understand that a bit more and where we're going with that.
Yeah, one thing that the .NET team is really focused on is, and for people like to understand where I sit in the equation of and my team is my team is a developer community team inside the developer division, and inside the developer division at Microsoft, you have VS Code, you have Playwright, you have our tooling like Python tooling, you have .NET, you have Visual Studio. Um, and then you also have Azure developer experience, so things like Azure Functions, container apps, things like that. So that's all in there. So our community team sits side by side the PM and engineers teams, and we build. We watch them build the product, and we give feedback based on the community and help them engage closer. So we have community stand-ups. We just had an Aspire event. You spoke there
Yep.
yesterday. Those are the things that my team helps run to help connect the community to the engineering team and the PM team closer. And we also advocate for the product. So I'm building stuff. My team's talking. We're doing conferences. We're out doing user groups, things like that.
Hmm.
So what's fascinating is like each member of my team really has like a specialty. And I'm obviously like a Xamarin.NET Maui person, like really in there. I've never been a web person. Um, but Jeff Fritz and John Galloway, my team, real web people and
Hmm.
really on the Blazor train. And I got into Blazor early on because it reminded me a little bit of my first interactions building mobile apps. And I
Hmm.
remember my wife is a web dev, and I remember trying to build a website, and I'm like, I don't understand. I have this button. It's like an MVC website or something. I'm like, I have this button, and I click it, and like I can't understand like where's the code running? I was like, where?
Yep.
Because like when you build a mobile app or a desktop app, it's like it's in the box, right?
Hmm.
And my wife is just like shaking her head. She's like, it's on the server. It's like it's on the server. Like she's an ASP.NET developer, right? So she's like, it's on the server. Like you click the button and things like that. I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like my mind was blown. I was like, I have no idea how the internet works. So when I found Blazor and watch, Dan and Safia and Steve, like and Todd and Jeff talk about, it, I was like, okay, like I understand. And then the WebAssembly part, it made sense. Like the code is running it's in the browser, right?
Hmm.
I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And it's native. It's like so cool. WebAssembly, it's amazing. So I understood it, and I was like, this is great. I'm still not a web developer. CSS, not my jam, just terrible at
Yep.
it. But someone can make me a nice toolkit. The thing is, the .NET team, like I said, focus on it, really want to enable developers to build for the platforms and the ways that they want, that makes them happy, that makes them productive, and deliver a great product. And the cool part is that there's a lot of fun foundational pieces, right? .NET MAUI, foundational, where the MAUI toolkit, where Uno, Avalonia can build on top of them and do a lot of great things. WinUI can build on top of it. Just .NET Runtime and ASP.NET Core, Blazor running on top of it, integrated inside of it. So when you think about it, there is a plethora, a cornucopia of web developers in the world. And there's a plethora and cornucopia of desktop and mobile developers in the world. And sometimes those mobile developers would like to build some web applications. And sometimes those web applications would like to build some mobile and desktop applications. And there's a lot of web developers, especially a lot of .NET web developers with ASP.NET Core, Blazor, just a lot. And one of the biggest requests from web developers was like, it would be amazing if I could use my skills, my knowledge to build native mobile and desktop applications. And for them, going through the research and talking to people, it's, well, how much does it need to be native? Like, what's the important part, right? 12 years ago is really different. Like, to me, it was everything's got to be native UI, native performance, native, that was Xamarin, native. Nowadays, everything's hybrid. I mean, we're just using like Restream, and we use StreamYard. I'm just in the browser. I got desktop apps. There's a little bit of everything everywhere. Like, I love native apps. Native apps are my jam. I think everything should be 100% native, but it's not 100% realistic at the end of the day for every engineering team. So you got Blazor, right? This SPA, this amazing way of building web apps, all in C#. It can run in the browser, it can run on the server, it can run in between, boom. So what Blazor did, and the Blazor team did, they said, well, what if we extended Blazor and created sort of a third or fourth mode, which is a hybrid mode, where we, for all intents and purposes, say you can take a custom Blazor control and you can shove it in a native app platform. And that can be WinForms, WPF, or .NET MAUI. And we often talk about with .NET MAUI because it's on all the platforms, right? Based on what you need. And the cool part here is that you can mix and match. So you can have some native UI, you can have some Blazor UI, you can use each of the different navigation systems. Some people take their Blazor web app 100%, shove it into a MAUI shell, and then ship it to the App Store. And they obviously do things that then natify it a little bit. So for example, in .NET 9, there's actually gonna be a template file new Blazor hybrid app that gives you the .NET MAUI and the web app and the shared code.
Nice.
And Beth Massey did a cool demo at Build where she said, okay, what does this mean? I have this Blazor app and almost 100% of the code, besides some startup code, is shared. Well, why do I care about it being native at this point? And then she showed, well, let me show you the difference of like image pickers, taking a photo, getting geolocation, doing augmented reality, accessing and putting a native view inside of that application. Because since you can take this Blazor web view and put it inside of a .NET MAUI application, that means everything in .NET MAUI is now available to you. So it means that there is no WebAssembly. There is no server. It's just running on the .NET runtime that's running on your device because it's using .NET MAUI to do that. And then you can access all of the native APIs. So for example, if you want to sell in-app subscriptions, you just use StoreKit. You just use the Android billing library, right? Or my plugin library that I have that makes it easier, right? You can then take advantage of now every .NET MAUI UI component and every Blazor UI component, and you can bring it into this application. So you can mix and match. Is that perfect for everybody? No. Is it perfect for a lot of people? Yes. Are there people that are just going to use .NET MAUI and not want anything hybrid at all? Totally. And that's totally fine. But it's that flexibility, I think, of the stack, right? Blazor really, I'm sure people have noticed, has really been at the forefront of what the ASP.NET Core team has really pushed heavily on building web apps, MAUI for mobile desktop. Marrying those two things together is really special because now you're unlocking this potential where, and there's tons of web developers I've talked to, like, yeah, I still do my Blazor stuff, and I followed you, James, for a decade, and I'm all in on the MAUI train, right? I'm doing all XAML, and I'm loving it. I got the two things. But there is a set of individuals, right? It makes sense that I don't have the time to invest in learning an entire new framework, I'm okay learning 20% of it, but I would like to reuse 80% of what I know already. And that's that hybrid scenario that's out there. So I think it's really great. And the team's working not only just a Blazor web view that's in the box, that ship's generally available. It's in the box, been there for a while. But there's also a new hybrid web view. And that hybrid web view is being able to run JavaScript stuff. So if you have a Vue or React component, you can run that inside of a Maui application as well. So that flexibility that's out there, and these things are not just coming from like the .NET team. It's like developers are requesting these things, right? So and they want these because at their company, at their startup, them as a solo developer, they're like, I have this awesome Vue app and I have this .NET backend. Man, it'd be great to put this inside of this and I can ship it to the app store. I become a billionaire. That sounds great. And that's what, hopefully the flexibility wants people to do. And when you think about it, Umar is a good question is it just a wrapped website into a thing? It's like, well, you still got to follow the app store policies, right? Like you can't, it has to have some unique flavor, some unique thing, right? And it's not just a website. Like I'm not just putting the Raygun website onto it, right? Now there might be the ability, and I know nothing about the infrastructure of Raygun at all, but imagine that the Raygun dashboard, right? And the app management in the back end of Raygun is a Blazor website. Man, what would be great is like we could like create a really custom Blazor mobile optimized thing, and then we'll put it in here, and then we could do some really cool things. Like maybe people could integrate into some of the different system services, or take a photo, or do some things. So now like 80% of what's on the Raygun website is now inside this mobile app, but then it's been spiced up a little bit, right? So instead of just someone going to Edge, the only browser in the world, or Chrome, or wherever you go, hopefully Edge, you go to Edge, you go to your browser and you type in, Raygun, and you have to log in. Well, now you just have a Raygun app, right? And it's a little bit different than a PWA. So progressive web app, which is going to be sandboxed by the PWA spec. And that's great for some folks. Like I have the Starbucks PWA, for example, because I'm like, I'll try this out. Just one less thing to install. But there's something really nice, the visibility of the app store and accessing those native APIs, but again, it's the flexibility, right? And that to me, through my career, JD, is like the flexibility of .NET, the flexibility of the frameworks. That's what I've fallen in love with. And hopefully meeting developers where they're at and what they need is kind of what the team is doing. And I think it's working really good so far. There's a lot of excitement. I mean, if you go to my channel alone on YouTube, like you just search by popular, and it's like you see a lot of beginning tutorials. You'll see a lot of like Xamarin stuff, and then a lot of .NET Maui stuff, and then that Blazor hybrid stuff is really high up there, right? So there's a lot of excitement about it. So I can see that excitement there too. So it's really cool.
I think, I'm seeing a lot more excitement, and I know this might sound a bit odd to say, but more excitement than I actually anticipated for a cross-platform play, because there can be some challenges in there. But kind of like you early on, I'm a bit the same of like, native. But why do I like native coding? Well, I like native coding because I have, a bordering on fetish for efficiency. I like high performance code. I like things to run as well as they can. And certainly that's a limiting factor when you've got a brand new platform like the iPhone first coming out. Like I still have my iPhone 1 somewhere in the cupboard here. Those things were not powerful. Like today, like you're probably the same as me. The last 3 or 4 versions of the iPhone that came out, I don't really see a lot of the difference because they're so high performing now. And that comes back to the human factor, which is what's going to be cost effective to deliver to customers some value. And that's ultimately what matters. And I've probably said it in some other founder and friends, but a saying that really stuck with me from university was that to the user, the interface is the system. And the reason I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge is a lot of us as engineers, we really love to think about the elegance of the code, the structure of the code, what algorithms are we using, all of that stuff. And it's like, that only matters to us. The user just needs to get an action performed. And if there's a faster way to market by leveraging tools that can take advantage of your existing skills, especially when you're in a late stage where there is performance on the table to use, go for it. Like
Yeah.
just go faster.
I like to joke that most of my applications display a one number on the screen that update at random intervals, sometimes every second, sometimes every 5. But I did a holiday hack a few years ago, and me and Frank on my podcast, we talked about it at the time, was called My Cadence. I'm a big cycler, and during
Yep.
COVID, I got a really cheap indoor spin bike in the garage, and I attached a little $20 cadence sensor, which shows you how many rotations per minute you're doing. And there was not really any good apps that would connect to it and just show me a big number on the screen so I could slap my iPhone or iPad onto the bike. So I just built it, and I wrote like it was gross code. It was just like I wrote it in like 24 hours, and I had my laptop on the bike debugging in real time, like spinning. And my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm so close to making this work. But when I think about that app, right, I built it all with native UI, native components. And at that application, what was native about it? Well, Bluetooth that needed to connect to these devices, and then also in-app billing, and I needed to be able to have a pro plan that would enable some revenue. So I'm doing this in my spare time. I like to make $2-3 every year, and but that application is a good example. Like even in the chat, it's like, well, it's just a website and the thing. It's like, well, maybe the Blazor developer doesn't even want to build a website for their app. Maybe they just want to build an app. Like maybe they want to build My Cadence. They could build all of that UI 100% in Razor that they know and love. And then they could leverage Bluetooth and they could leverage in-app billing. And that might be the only non-web code that's out there, but it's C#.net. And that's cool. Like I built it natively. Cool. You could build it with Webpack. Cool. Like I could have built and mixed it. Right. So to me, it's like, what am I going to be most productive in? Right. And for me, it's inside of Visual Studio, it's with C#, with .net. It's the things that I love. Yeah. So I think that's the cool part of it is that flexibility is there's now less of a barrier for any type of developer to get into any type of development, right? It's a lot easier if I'm a client dev, that's my bread and butter. It's easier now for me to start my journey on web development, especially server development. But if I'm a web developer, now it's a lot easier for you to start your journey building mobile and desktop applications, based on what you need. And I think that's what's cool as things have evolved.
Yeah, I think it's worth acknowledging too, and this might be a bit of a sensitive point in today's market, but we went through this, call it the ZERP era, of lots of money floating around the industry, and we got hyper specialized. I do front end only on this, I do back end only on this, and I think the reality is, we used to think that a full stack person was this special category, and I've often felt like nobody's truly full stack. I feel like Windows 3.11 was about the point when a developer could still understand every option around, and at that point, it just sort of got murky. So really what you're saying is like, are you capable of being or comfortable picking up and running across multiple problem domains in there? And I just think that's an important thing to note in this current economic time, not being painted into a singular corner, and that ability to kind of say, hey, I can take a tackle of the web stuff or the mobile stuff or whatnot, actually is a marketable capability for people. So
I think of it like this too, is as someone that's not a web developer, I look at like .NET Aspire now, kind of in that same vein. And .NET Aspire is kind of these building blocks for building distributed cloud native applications. There's lots of components in it. There's orchestration, there's service discovery, there's these cool components that let you like integrate in databases and RabbitMQ and caching and AI and all these different services in. There's distribution and there's metrics, telemetry, and all this stuff. I'll tell you this much. Before this, I went down the path and Nish, who worked on my team, and he does a lot of our app patterns at Microsoft for enterprise development. I was like, Nish, I want to understand what Docker is, like what a compose. I want to speak the lingo, right? Because this is not my jam. I'm not a cloud native developer. And I went through that learning journey, and it was a journey, and it was a lot. I'm glad I know that the verbiage and the lingo, and I can build and understand basic Docker files. With .NET Aspire being like these building blocks, it now is like super accelerated the way that I build web applications and distributed applications. And a distributed application could be a web app, or it could be a web app and an API, or it could
Hmm.
be in web app and API, 5 other APIs, 18 other containers. It could be all those things in between. Most of my things are like 1 or 2 things, but to go in and create a .NET Aspire app host and add it into my existing projects and get service discovery where they know how to talk to each other automatically. And all of a sudden I had these service defaults that give me health checks for free, telemetry for free, resiliency for free, all built in. It's making me a better developer. Like, and it's not hiding necessarily the complexity. It is doing cool stuff for me automatically, but like I can read the code and I can understand what it's doing. So
Yep.
it's really this next evolution of how I see it is like I am a developer that's building client apps. I also need to build distributed apps on occasion and
Hmm.
understand that I might have colleagues that need to do this as well. How do we be all productive together? And how do we
Yes.
get insight locally or we need to deploy? And I feel like that's where the sweet spot of .NET is cross-platform, frameworks are cross-platform, web even more cross-platform and hybrid. And now with .NET Aspire and the cloud native work that the team has done, it really is accelerating the ability for .NET developers or other developers to be more productive and build better applications. At the end of the day, we want to build better apps, hopefully faster, but ones that are also more resilient, more
Yep.
observable, more secure at the end of the day, because if those frameworks, right, we're talking about the evolution, if the frameworks and the languages don't evolve, the world around us is evolving, right?
Mm.
So we do need to evolve. Everyone's at their own pace, and that's okay, right? I'm not saying everyone needs to go and update their projects every, like me, update Visual Studio every other day. But it's nice when you see that positive energy from the product and the
Hmm.
community at the same time. And I feel like that's where we're at the sweet spot right now for C# and .NET.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Momentum begets more momentum, and I think like it was essential we went through this, but it's nice to be past the point of migrating from framework to core. I know we've dropped the core label now; it's just .NET. I
Yep.
can hear Scott Hunter telling me off. But that was a necessary distraction, and I feel like we're now into the more interesting use of the technologies. Now, because there are a few folks that'll be listening today that are already Raygun customers, if you're not aware, we've shipped some .NET Aspire support. We even built a mini little Raygun site that runs in a container on your machine, and we even brought the AI error resolution capability. So what that does is it runs a local model on your PC. So even if you're working in an organization, and to be fair, there's a lot like this right now that say, hey, don't let anything go off to these third
Yeah.
parties. This will actually run on your PC. You can delete the container, no training, no sketchy stuff, is going on there. But really encourage, we've already got some customers that are playing around with this, looking at how they can improve their development experience. Because it can be that challenge with large distributed systems to go, well, what does localhost look like?
Yeah. Yeah.
I built here. And that's what I quite like about it, is it subtly enforces that thinking about where it's going to land, but
Yeah.
giving you a great experience locally at the same time. And I'm really excited to see where .NET Aspire kind of continues to evolve. But yeah.
Yeah. There's a cool Matthew Leibowitz on the engineers on the Maui team. He has this cool demo that I'm going to be demoing. I'm stealing it from him, but it's a really cool demo experiment that the engineering team is working on for .NET Aspire and .NET Maui integration. So you have your backend services and you have your dashboard, and you want to have and boot up a .NET Maui application that has that service discovery and observability for local development time. And the hard part of that is localhost, actually. Like, things are running in Docker containers and this. What if you want to put it on your phone? What if you want to, you're inside of some VM or something? A lot of restrictions. So the cool workaround that he does use dev tunnels, which is built into Visual Studio, but also just a CLI
Mm.
from Microsoft. If you use something like ngrok or any other sort of tunneling software similar in that vein, but you can create like temporary or anonymous or logged in tunnels that give you a unique URL. So the cool part is that with the dev tunnels and Aspire and the .NET Maui integration, it can basically do service discovery to the tunnel instead of localhost, which means it kind of unlocks this productivity where I could spin
Mm.
up all my backends locally. I could spin up AI and a container to the stuff, and all my mobile apps, all my devices can still be productive there, which is like really cool. So it's a cool experiment. I'm excited, but that type of stuff that you're talking about, that engineering loop, right?
Mm.
And a lot of time people think of it as, I'm gonna, write some code, hit publish, and then DevOps is going to do my dev loop and then report back, blah, blah, blah. No, really, it's really just a lot of it is on your local machine, not just like GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio and VS Code, but are those other things, the IntelliSense, the
Mm-hmm.
running in containers, the aspirification of applications, like being able to be really productive and get
Mm-hmm.
rid of those bottlenecks. I think we're just going to see more and more on that, because that's what's important to developers. Like, this stuff is mature, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the programming languages, even Swift, even Kotlin, mature language, has been around for a long time, right? C# very mature, right? Java very mature, but evolving still, like really getting up there.
Mm-hmm.
So it really comes down to that developer experience, right? How do we really, really optimize that? And that's what I've been always excited about for the last 20 years of my life, is developer productivity. But it's still going. And I think that's the thing that really fascinates me, is like, every time I see some cool demo from the Visual Studio or VS Code, I'm like, wow, I would have never thought about that. But damn it, that is cool. Like
Mm-hmm.
going in, you're just like, oh, just like I'm committing this code, and it's like Copilot writes it for me. I'm like, what? I'm like, that is just like, it knows what I did better than I did. I have no idea what I wrote, but it like does it. And you're like, that's not just productivity. That's like a better experience today, and me 5 years from now that's going to look back on this commit and like, what did I do? I have no idea. So that type of stuff just really, really is awesome. Yeah.
Yep. Now we are coming to the end, so if folks have some questions they'd like to drop while we would do some we'll answer some of those. We tried to answer a lot of the ones that have come through as they've been popping. Appreciate the open chats in there too. But while they're posting a couple of those there, James, we won't do a deep dive on this, but I did see you're looking to leave social media a little bit. So how should people try to find you? Like where is the best place to subscribe to James these days?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been in a struggle with social media and social media detoxing through the years, and people that have followed me have seen, I've deactivated accounts, I've renewed accounts, I've deleted apps, I've gone back and forth. And, to me, there's not just a life work balance, but there's a life social media work balance as well. Those three things in there. And I'm really trying to focus on the life part more than than anything, to be honest with you, because my wife is the most important person in my life, and that's what I want to focus on. I can easily get distracted. I have that squirrel, mindset, from like up, like, oh, it's over here everywhere. And that's what these things are meant to do. And I do love social media. So like, I've been on X for a long time and other places, but I did make a conscious decision to step away fully. And you can't really delete your account necessarily, but I can log off and just not log back in. And I pinned a message. But what I found is that I said, okay, well, what social media does feed my soul? Because I don't think there's anything wrong with X. I don't think there's anything wrong with Instagram. I mean, there's stuff wrong with anything, right? That's out there, but inherently the idea of social media is I'm not against. But what I found is that I really enjoyed the newer features on LinkedIn, because there's like a
Mhm.
follow button now, so you can follow people that like post good content. And I follow a lot of like Maui people and .NET people, and that feeds my soul quite a bit. And reposting stuff on there and posting stuff there. And we have a cool .NET group. If you go to the .NET website and click on community, you'll find the LinkedIn .NET group. There's like 600,000 people on there. It's wild. Great way to get insight from all sorts of different people. If you want one place that's like it's hand curated. Me and my team and community members hand curate the post. So no job postings, no recruiter spam, no shenanigans, just awesome .NET content. So you can find me on there, just James Montemagno. That's me. And then on YouTube. I know it's not social media, but it's the best way to find content from me. I do community posts. I do videos almost every single week on .NET, on Aspire, on .NET Maui, on C#, all that goodness. And I do that stuff on my spare time. I do stuff on the .NET YouTube and the .NET blog, but on my spare time on my weekends, I'm a manager now, so I don't have as much time at work to do the videos, but on the weekends and at nights, I can commit a little bit of time to doing cool, fun stuff that you'll see on there as well. So you can definitely engage with me there, but that is the best place. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. So we've got a couple of questions here from folks. We are pushing right up hard to our time. We just for folks listening, we normally sort of target 45 minutes. We're at 54, so we'll speed through a couple of here questions. So I'm just going to pick one here, Maddie, who's our behind the scenes person who makes this all work. But how are your workplaces using AI? Do we see some big changes coming to the .NET ecosystem now? I think it's going to be a long answer to talk about how we're all using AI. I'm sure Microsoft's using a lot. I know we're using a lot at Raygun internally, but maybe we talk a little bit more to that .NET ecosystem. We've got .NET 9 coming up. Like, what does AI in the Microsoft .NET world look like in the next sort of 12 to 18 months that you're able to talk about?
On the .NET blog, there's a great blog post from team members talking about what's kind of been rolled out since .NET 8. In partnerships, like there's a new OpenAI .NET SDK in partnership with OpenAI. There's obviously all the Azure integrations, but there's Milvus and Quadrant and all these other vector databases and all this other work, integrations into Aspire. There's not like a Milvus one just for Aspire components, which is cool. There's going to be a .NET Conf focus event on AI in the next few months. You can go to the .NET blog or focus.netconf.net and be sure there because it's going to be a whole day of AI plus .NET. And you're going to see a lot of stuff coming in .NET 9, but also things that are there available today for you as well. So I think there's a lot of maturity coming around it. Semantic kernel always evolving, really exciting. So a lot of things there. I think for me at work, I just use a lot of GitHub Copilot, obviously, all through not just like in VS and VS Code, but also outside as well. So in the browser is also very helpful. And I'll tell you this much: when they flipped on Teams integration with Copilot, game changer. Like it's just a complete game changer all day, every day, for getting up to speed, not only in Teams but in email. And that's been like the biggest boost in things. Personally, I use for all my YouTube thumbnails, the background, it's kind of faded out because I use Photoshop to kind of edit it. But in the background, I try to generate a fun graphic for every background that's different for every thumbnail. And that's just kind of fun to do in general. But that's a lot of what I'm using. And I think you'll see a lot more on the .NET and AI side. But you think about it is, .NET powers a lot of the AI at Microsoft, right? Copilot, all of Copilot run by .NET, semantic kernel integration, like all Bing Chat, all these things, which is awesome. It's not always necessarily the front end, but often the back end. So, lot of cool stuff.
I've had a little bit of a look with the semantic kernel stuff, and we obviously have AI features built into Raygun now for our customers. But one of the things I've found really useful is when I see a new project, newish, so ideally it's come out before the knowledge cutoff of an LLM, and just taking an hour like on a Saturday or a Sunday and pretty much working with ChatGPT or even Claude, to sort of say, hey, this project, help me write a little demo. And it's actually been a great way to start to learn and really compress the time to get a feel for something. We didn't touch on it today, but like you and I are obviously not super hardcore Python devs, but that's obviously the language at the core of a lot of AI. And the great thing is when you're actually an experienced developer, you can kind of talk to these AI systems in a way that you can get what you want very effectively, because really it's syntactical difference, not actually problem solving differences. And what I've been finding is, and look, this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but like Python always feels to me like actually running an environment is being held together with bubblegum and sellotape compared to some of the others. Like once you get it working, you're like, back away. It's working. And so building those sort of, whether it's a container running the Python bits or whatnot, and then putting .NET around that to just sort of interact, that has actually worked really well from my end as well, and just trying to keep up with things. But anyway, we're at time, 9:59 over here in New Zealand, getting onto your afternoon up there. James, I really want to thank you so much for coming on. I really love your energy. It's been, for those of you who don't know, I lived up in Seattle for a few years, saw James a bit more in person. So it's been a while since we've had a real long sit down and chat. But thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, as well as sharing all the knowledge with everybody watching.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.